Good evening. I'm Jakob Music, recording from Via Monticello, Maryland, and this is The Word. Today, we will discuss Weight Watchers falls into disarray, Rush Limbaugh becomes a regular on Fox News as his radio show looks to be in jeopardy, tragic incident led to the slaughter of a baby deer, and the contested elections in Zimbabwe, how to interpret them. But first, some headlines. Adult entertainment entity Adam and Eve is launching a channel on American satellite and cable television. The programs will include movies produced by the company as well as content in keeping with their strict standards of sex positivity and couple friendliness. The channel is available as of today. After his drug-related death last month, Glee actor Corey Monteith is going to receive something of a tribute on his television show. In something of a quandary, the writers of the show have decided to write Monteith's drug use into his character's exit from the series. It is not clear whether it will be stated that the character, named Finn, will be written as dead or simply as using drugs. The cast of Glee will also reportedly film a series of public service announcements about the dangers of narcotics. Monteith died from a lethal combination of heroin and alcohol. TMZ is reporting that a combination of medications used to treat schizophrenia is working for Amanda Bynes. The star has been in hospital for the past few weeks after a series of bizarre incidents. That run of alarming incidents ended when the star was found in a stranger's driveway lighting fires. Her dog, who had accompanied her in trespassing, was found covered in gasoline. Miss Bynes' symptoms are reportedly being controlled by doctors, and she is showing much improvement. The report goes on to say that Miss Bynes stopped talking to herself and insulting people 3 days ago. Radar Online, however, has released a report claiming exactly the opposite, saying that she is angry, combative, and hostile. Embattled Full House star Jodie Sweetin, who revealed her struggles with addiction to crystal methamphetamine in a memoir, is now fighting off rumors that she has entered rehab once again. During an appearance on TMZ Live, Ms. Sweetin seems to intimate that the rumor was the product of her estranged ex-husband, who she is currently going through a divorce with. The Canyons, a film starring Lindsay Lohan and porn star James Dean, is finally being released. The film, which is described as an erotic thriller, is available on video-on-demand platforms now and will enter theaters this weekend. Home prices in the United States have returned to where they were in 2004, 3 years before the peak in housing prices preceded a crash. From this, a new editorial on FoxBusiness.com responds to those who are suggesting that this could indicate a new boom-and-bust cycle born anew. The editorial cites several differences in the state of the market in 2004 and 2013, including inflation. The editorial argues that when inflation is factored in, housing prices still have not risen, as some would indicate, and would certainly be lower than the 2004 levels on record. Those were your headlines for The Word. We'll be right back with Annika's Angle and our first film. This is The Word. As always, I am with my consistent panelist and one of my best friends, The Word regular contributor, Annika Wolf. How are you today?
I'm great. Nice rainstorm, isn't it?
It's just super hot here. There are these brewing storms, but they never come to fruition. And even worse, the air conditioning is broken in my house, so it feels like a human sauna. But let's go on to something as equally disgusting as my hot house, which is methamphetamine. I think in Annika's Angle today, you have an interesting meth-related story for us, right?
Well, and that is the tip of the iceberg, but yeah.
Ooh.
What I have kind of found is people are getting more and more creative in the ways in which they smuggle things into prisons.
Yes.
To help their prisoners out.
Yes.
Well, when I came upon this story today, it just triggered a tirade of memories for me with other stories. She arrived at the detention center to marry her husband, and as being searched, she asked how she could kiss him. And the sheriff's officer noticed she had trouble keeping her dentures on. And then he noticed something in her mouth.
Oh my God.
Turns out that she had methamphetamine and Suboxone.
What?
In her dentures.
In her dentures?
In her dentures. So He is now charged with possession and introducing drugs into a county institution.
Oh, God.
And she's in custody, and she has a court appearance scheduled for, yesterday. And I'm sure will be appointed an attorney, and I doubt she can come up with the $25,000 bail, just judging by, her appearance and the fact that she's done what she's done.
Oh, God, yeah. Well, how old is this woman?
Her name is Britta West. Probably late 50s, mid to late.
Oh, okay. But then again, meth can age you, and it can also make you... But meth can age you quickly. It can also make you lose your teeth, so who knows. Is meth a problem down where you live in the South and Florida area?
But not as much in my area.
Oh, okay.
The area of Jakob habits.
It is,
doctors, so basically you pay the money, they give you what you want.
Oh,
and they get it filled in the pharmacy here, and...
So why is it so easy in Florida?
The county that I'm in, Lee County, has the highest incidence of prescription drug abuse in the country.
Yeah, I mean, Florida is infamous.
I have no idea why my particular county is like that. I mean, literally no idea.
Well, it's because of those clinics, right?
Right, but those clinics can be anywhere.
Yeah, that's true.
This particular county.
And they opened there for a reason, probably,
I'm sure that's why. And I have seen quite a few of them advertised, and when I was looking for a doctor, I looked long and hard to find a legitimate one.
Who wasn't some pain dispensary clinic, yeah.
Exactly. He shakes insurance, he's not pay as you go. But even, every time I go to the office for an appointment, they take my picture.
Yes.
Not the official ID, but they, take my picture as they did on the first day I came in, so that way if you have a change in look, they'll know.
Yeah, that's true. That's so interesting. I mean, Florida is, infamous for prescription drug and especially painkiller abuse.
Right, but you think that all the old people wouldn't be like that, but it is.
Yeah.
And there is one person that did it. He was a rather hefty gentleman, and he smuggled the drugs in by hiding it in rolls of fat.
What?
He was a 500-pound man, and he smuggled the gun in. He was in Texas, and he smuggled the gun in the layers of his fat.
He was 500 pounds.
Yes.
Oh,
and he did that. Another way that this is, scary, fascinating, but they took liquid drugs into the jail using coloring book pictures. That same drug, Suboxone, you can do as well as, that's a prescription drug for opiate addiction.
Oh, okay.
They basically crushed it up and turned it into a paste. It was orange paste.
Okay.
That was then painted on coloring book pages. And then crayon was scribbled over that, and it said, to Daddy on it. And they mailed it to the convict.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, and the only way they found this is when another inmate snitched. And they've been able to do that with a couple of different drugs, supposedly. It was discovered in Cape May, New Jersey, the big incident. There was one lady who went for a conjugal visit and tried to smuggle her husband out in a suitcase. Yep. There was one person who literally he was a 34-year-old prisoner, and he tried to smuggle over 30 items in his anus at once.
No.
Found 17 oxycodone pills, 1 cigarette, 6 matches, a flint, an empty syringe with an eraser over the needle, some lip balm, condom, CVS receipt, and a coupon.
Oh my God.
It's just throwing it in. I guess why not the receipt and the coupon?
Oh my God.
Of course there's the, standard, things in there.
How does that even work?
Oh, I don't know. And then the funniest one, there's 2 hysterical ones. One is a lady that hollowed out the golf ball and put the methadone or heroin or whatever inside the golf ball and managed to seal it up, and would just kind of toss it over the prison wall. So they'd walk by in the yard, they'd pick up a golf ball. That didn't last too long. Apparently golf balls are not something you see in prison very often, so...
Well, yeah, I would think not, and she's basically throwing drug bombs over the prison wall.
Right, but how about pigeons in Colombia?
What?
Yes, they take things to carrier pigeons to get the pigeons going in and out. And they overloaded one pigeon, so that's pretty much how that one was discovered and ended.
And like we talked about on the last show, like when you are an addict, that becomes the center of your life, and people will if they're blocked from getting what they think they need, they will come up with just ingenious ways to adapt to the circumstances to try to get drugs,
Oh, yeah, I mean, it really, really is kind of sad. And, going back to what you talked about in the opening, here on Glee, they're doing a tribute to a guy who died of a drug overdose.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a show that a lot of kids watch.
Yeah.
You don't want to make a tribute to him. This is...
Well, I mean, he was a part of the cast, and he did die. And no, so, like, what I think is good about the situation is they're not glossing over the issue. They are going to expose that his character has been using drugs.
Not necessarily. If the character went off to some whatever rehab, let's say, it's gone, then that's one thing. If they have the character dying and they make it serious, that's well, rehab is serious too, but irregardless, they're going to say that this character is no longer here because of drugs. Yeah.
So I don't think it's a glorification, really.
Hopefully not.
But let's move on to your second story. What do you have for us here?
Well, that all depends. How do you feel about your testicles?
How do I feel about my testicles? Well, I feel like they should stay attached to me.
Well, in that case, you may not want a dog person. A dog's supposed to be a man's best friend. So
Indeed.
A paralyzed man in Arkansas adopted this little stray,
Wonderful.
hoping to have a nice companion.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, the man went to sleep, and, he sleeps in the nude, and when he woke up, he noticed that he was in a wheelchair. He had no feeling below the legs.
Mm-hmm.
And woke up, and he had a weird pain in his midsection.
Oh, no.
And he looked down, and he found this newly adopted dog, this white little dog, and it had its throat. Then he realized that the dog had eaten one of his testicles.
Oh, my God.
The dog had only been rescued 3 weeks earlier, and it did have to be euthanized, and they have testing babies because,
Oh, God. That's...
In a case like that, that's a pretty severe thing. It's not like he did anything to the dog or,
Oh, God. That's...
testicles while he was sleeping. Now, granted, it is a stray dog that he adopted, and you don't know its history, yada, 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 but that's still pretty decent.
I don't even know where to, what, I mean...
Well, there's this gentleman, and he cooked his own testicles.
He what?
Yep. And he and his girlfriend, and he cut it up and ate it.
Why?
It doesn't really quite say. He talks more about the taste.
The taste? God, this is... So...
And he and his girlfriend ate it.
Oh, my God.
And he also said, since he's most likely going to get his excess scrotal tissue removed, maybe I'll fry up a little... This is a quote now. Besides, I'm still most likely to get my excess scrotal tissue removed, so maybe I'll fry up a little nut-sack bacon. It's either that or tan it and make a coin purse. I think idea better, though.
Is this real?
Even a hint of semen.
They taste
really
like what?
Almost fell apart in your mouth. eaten bits of my own skin, sucked my own blood.
What?
Bitten tongue. Or, if you bite your fingernail or something.
Is this person a vampire?
No. Nope. And what even gets me is whatever, that's his own body part. But one of the pictures is the woman that he invited over.
No.
The boy to eat it with him.
What?
Yep.
Oh, that's just, your stories just get weirder and weirder. Well, thank you for your parade of crazy as normal. We're going to go to break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about what is happening to Weight Watchers. This is the word. We have a Fox Business article here talking about the company Weight Watchers International. So their CEO, David Kirchhoff, has stepped down, and their second quarter profits have come out, and they've dropped 16%. They had fewer paying members, which is what this article suggests is one of their problems, but it doesn't really explain why. It says shares tumbled 6.4% in late trading. As of the closing bell, the stock was down about 10.1% so far this year. Meeting paid weeks fell 10% and attendance was down 15%, while attendance fell 14.5% year over year. So, why? Why do you think this is happening?
I think, first of all, they have half their products they sell in stores now, so people don't go to any of the Weight Watchers stuff.
That's right.
Number one.
Yeah.
Number two, I think people are starting to realize that these type of diets just really don't work.
Yeah.
You cannot diet. You have to change your life.
Yes.
It is, a diet doesn't work. I am someone who has been heavy most of my life, to the point where I had gastric bypass surgery.
Yeah.
And for a year prior to that surgery, they had me talking to a nutritionist every day, or not every day, but for a year. Mm-hmm. I went and visited with the nutritionist at least once a month. Plus, I talked to her all the time whenever I had a question.
Yeah. And
I really think that's what it comes down to. I yo-yoed up and down for the longest time before all that. Now, I have other issues which caused me to not be able to lose any weight naturally.
Yeah.
Other physical issues. But, I was on Weight Watchers, and I do well and then get off it, and get back on it, and then do off it. And I think, although they encourage you to work the plan when you're off it, I really think that they don't give you all the tools that you need so that you come back.
So in a sense, would you agree that the business model of Weight Watchers is actually not conducive to making that essential lifestyle change?
Absolutely. I was on Nutrisystem for a while and lost weight, and I never ever cheated when I was on it. I was so good. The only cheating I would have would be a TCBI, fat-free, sugar-free sample cup.
Yeah.
Once, a month, literally. And I ended up losing a gallbladder and was part of the class action lawsuit, that sued them because of, losing body parts. Yeah, it did. And I've heard rumors that it caused liver damage now.
Oh, great. But going back to Weight Watchers, so you are someone who has experience going to these Weight Watcher centers and being a member?
Oh, yeah. Part of what I didn't like is the meeting. I didn't like sitting in the room listening to everybody complain. Support is great, but the way they were structured really wasn't supportive, in my opinion.
So overall, your experience was not helpful to sustained weight loss?
No, and I don't know a single person who's ever been on it that has sustained weight loss.
Wow. So really, it's looking like, getting this insight from somebody who's actually been there and tried this. The real question is seeming to be, how did they not get away with it, but how were they successful and for so long?
Were a little more successful because they charge so much for membership and pick up their meals.
So you think their strategy of branding health foods is actually cannibalizing their profits?
So it used to basically be the big three when it came to weight clinics.
Yes.
It was Weight Watchers was the big one, and then Nutrisystem came in, and that got really big. And then spawned off of Nutrisystem is Jenny Craig.
Okay.
She was actually a client of Nutrisystem, and instead of, freeze-dried, dehydrated food, she decided to do stuff in the freezer.
Yeah.
And, there was always your fad cookbooks that came and went.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
Atkins, South Beach, and then there was the cleanses, and
Mm-hmm.
there's always been stuff.
Yeah.
But I really think that with more of the internet getting bigger and resources that are more easily available, I really think that a lot of it is due to that as well. So they have teamed up with other establishments, to further their own brand. It's a total moneymaker. And yes, all businesses are there to make money.
So,
but what are they really doing?
Exactly.
You're eating your food. They put out a brochure telling you.
Back when Weight Watchers was more a viable business model, why were people buying into this, spending large amounts of money on this, or spending the large amounts of money on, Nutrisystem or Jenny Craig, or the different fad diets and the associated books with that, when they could just go to their nutritionist?
First of all, I think that gyms were a lot more expensive and fewer people went to the gym.
Okay.
And everybody, even down here, I'm in Florida, beautiful weather, it's sunny, it's warm. People are going to the gym and living in the gym.
Yes.
Like, why? It's beautiful, it's sunny, get outside.
Yeah.
But, this new culture of the gym has really taken off. And then in a lot of gyms, you have nutritional counseling that's there that's part of your experience, or it's easily available as part of your experience. And the other thing is a lot of people don't trust it, and they want nutritional counseling. They want a real nutritionist.
So why don't they just go to a nutritionist instead of buying into these things in the past?
Price, I think price and availability.
Do you think advertising also played a part?
Yes, because Weight Watchers was a huge conglomerate, and they were able to spend a small fortune on advertising, where your average nutritionist, even your above-average nutritionist, doesn't have the kind of money to advertise.
Exactly.
Weight Watchers does.
Can you see a way forward for this company? Can they be able to adapt to the modern era?
Sure, they can. It's just going to take a lot of work. Before they really didn't have to do that much. Like, look at our brochure, here you go. And also, if you ever go to the grocery store and you want to just get, like, a frozen meal for lunch or something, and you look at the Weight Watchers bills, they are prohibitively expensive.
Really?
Oh, God, yes.
Huh.
Absolutely.
We need to move on, so we're going to go to break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Rush Limbaugh. Is his time at the top of the radio heap over? This is The Word. So I have an editorial from Media Matters for America entitled Rush Limbaugh's Whirlwind Fox News Press Tour. It starts off by saying, Fox News' Greta Van Susteren sat down with Rush Limbaugh for the full hour of her program last night. Have you ever seen Greta's show?
I think once or twice.
What do you think of it?
It's been a long time, and I honestly don't even remember it.
Yeah. I think it's pretty uninteresting, but Van Susteren's interrogation of Rush, it says, was anything but harsh, and never touched on any of Limbaugh's ongoing contractual and advertiser problems, pretty much what you'd expect from a Fox News interview. Her characterization of the interview as rare was not accurate. In the past, Limbaugh has indeed been reticent to appear on cable news, and even boasted that any other platform besides his was a waste of time. Something has changed. Limbaugh's July 30th interview with Van Susteren marked the third time that Rush had appeared on Fox News this month. That's a dramatic shift from Limbaugh's long-standing disregard for television appearances. In July 2010, a caller to his radio show had asked him why he doesn't spend more time on television, and Rush said it was beneath him. He said, "I don't want to go on television shows with 1/10 of the audience that radio has." He went on to say, "I'm not going to rely on some other TV show or TV network or whatever informing you. That's my job. That's why I joke around, if I haven't said it, it hasn't been said. If I don't talk about it, it's not worth knowing it. Why should I waste my time on these shows? What do you think has changed in his circumstances or his attitude to prompt this newfound visibility?
You know, I don't know exactly what has changed. I know that she is a big Scientologist, and I'm wondering maybe, ZANU has slipped him something.
Do you think he's going to become a Scientologist?
But I know that there is an article that I did read that as of February, what the big guy in Scientology is, they call him Fleet Admiral, okay?
Okay.
And the big guy's name is Fleet Admiral David
Miscavige, yeah.
Miscavige. And he ordered, Admiral Tom Cruise to recruit new and better celebrities. And there's a list of 25 that they have on that list.
Really?
And, yes. And number 18 is Rush Limbaugh.
Oh, Annika,
maybe it's working.
You just brought a new angle into this. You are reaching journalist level. I'm so glad you uncovered this. This is an angle I had no idea about.
Yeah, they want Spielberg, like that'll ever happen. They want Angelina Jolie, Oprah, Justin Bieber,
that is
Kim Kardashian. They want Britney, Tyler Perry. They want Jen Aniston, Brad Pitt. Believe it or not, they want Gary Busey. I don't know.
Because they're so anti-drug, they want to help him out a little bit. But that is an overly ambitious list.
Yep.
But then again, when we had our discussion about Scientology prompted by Leah Remini's exit, their mission, the mission is to take over the world for Scientology. And so these celebrities are an essential part of that. So I think it would behoove all of us who are cautious of Scientology to just keep an eye on the situation and see if Rush maybe mentions Scientology.
And get this, there is a guy there, and his spokesman from the Celebrity Center in Hollywood, named Ken, you can believe it, Delusion. That's his name.
Stop it.
Ken Delusion. Delusion. Okay?
Okay.
And anyways, he was speaking, he's a Church of Scientology spokesman.
Yes.
And he says that, quote, the entire agonized future of every man, woman, and child is Earth. But on Earth is at stake. And he also went to note that the, quote, Church of Scientology's aggressive affection and caring is sometimes mistaken for stalking or spying by those who do not understand what real caring means. All we want is for celebrities to join the Church of Scientology and lead others into the search of Scientology. We also want celebrities to care enough about planetary clearing to donate large sums of money to the IAS.
Wonderful.
So,
do you think that, and this is going off on this tangent, but Scientology is fascinating. This is not the first time it's been brought up.
That could be an angle, because,
Yeah, it's very conceivable.
Who knows? Could it be that he's afraid of losing his audience? Possibly. But I still think that he's the number one listened to, radio person in the country. If I'm not mistaken. I think he's still at number one.
And you know what? It's true, but it's, and it also brings me to the fact that he could have chosen Bill O'Reilly. He could have chosen Sean Hannity. Why did he go to Greta Van Susteren, who in the past has been referred to as a liberal?
Yeah, and that's all he's ever gone to, basically. Yeah,
that's pretty strange.
Unless, who knows? They could have a personal friendship.
Yeah, and who knows? Who knows?
But trust her.
I would ask you this question. Do you think Scientology, the church, do you think the Church of Scientology is succeeding in their efforts to make themselves more respectable and, convert the world to their faith?
No, not at all.
I know. You know what's scary, though, is if this show ever does get larger recognition, Scientology is going to be on us in a second.
Not if, when.
When. But, because, and I'm not even saying this because I'm having a big hood moment or whatever, no. Because, we talked about those memoirs I wrote. I mean, not wrote.
Yep.
The memoirs that I read, they will scan the media for references of Scientology, and they will go after you and monitor you, Well,
like you said, they're not spying.
It's aggressive caring.
Caring. Caring for you.
Well, we need to go...
You're loved, Jacob. You're loved.
Oh, I'm loved by Scientology. Great. Wonderful. But back to Rush Limbaugh specifically. Do you think it's reached this kind of cap where people are just sick of him?
It's really hard to say. If you listen to Mark Levin or some of the other guys on Fox Radio,
yeah,
they have gone so far to the right that I'm wondering if maybe Rush is becoming a little more moderate compared to some of these guys.
See, that shows you really interesting what the situation is like if Rush Limbaugh is a moderate in any situation,
Yeah, I mean, some of these other guys are, really out there,
Yeah, Glenn Beck.
But then they're way out there.
Yeah. So...
And I used to like Levin, but he's just nuts.
Yeah. Well, let's continue in this editorial. It finishes up that Rush has logged 3 Fox interviews over the last month. It's hard to see how this shift in media strategy is not linked to Limbaugh's trouble with his I guess what they would call it, his distributor, Cumulus Media, who I guess owns radio stations, and their reported plans to drop his show from their 40-plus radio stations at the end of the year.
Do you realize 40 radio stations? That's nothing.
That's true. But
That's nothing.
I know, but then again, there is so much consolidation in radio, so that they probably represent 40 major radio markets. Cumulus Media is apparently the second largest radio company in the country.
Yeah, Mel Karmazin's is the number 1, and then Cumulus.
Yeah, so it's probably, 40's not a lot. We have so many radio stations, but from a perspective of market share, it's probably taking quite a hit. This
right, but he could end up going private like Howard Stern did.
Yeah.
And go to, Sirius XM and probably make much more money doing that.
And you know what? He could also so easily do the kind of Glenn Beck model with the Blaze paid memberships. He would easily have paid people immediately.
Oh, God, yes. So I don't think that, Cumulus dropping him is any big deal.
Yeah.
He's got enough of a following that he'll get picked up.
Yeah, and
And it's an if.
Yeah.
And if they don't drop him, he can really take them to the cleaners financially.
Absolutely. And
renegotiate his contract and take them to the cleaners.
So I think liberals are kind of overselling this. I don't know if you heard, but Cumulus also announced that they would drop Hannity too, and people were kind of like, "Ooh, yay!" But you're right. When you look at it like this,
it could be this could be a strategy by Cumulus to get people to see who's listening too, and see how many comments they get, and
Well, also,
have an idea of their listener base.
Exactly, but also it could be a bargaining technique.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We're going to drop you. Oh yeah, we're going to, and he'll sell himself around. And for him, it could be, he can then go and sell himself around and be like, yeah, you're not going to take me. Well, I could go here for this much. Now, what are you going to do? It's all negotiating and
So and really, we're not. We don't know what the. At least we don't have any reports of what the background kind of machinations are. But somebody like Sirius XM would probably snap him up in a second.
Oh, easily. Easily. Or I'm sure Fox would snap him up in a second.
Oh yeah,
too.
Fox News Radio, absolutely.
To be a permanent, a permanent consultant with Fox. And even he could be snapped up as a TV consultant for Fox as well.
Yeah. If he could, if he is going to more of a television strategy, that would fit perfectly,
Right, and by saying I don't do television, that indicates to me that, maybe he is. Because this way, when he does do it, he's like, well, I don't really do television, but this station is so good. I just had.
Oh yeah, I definitely see how that could be kind of a like a tactic as well. But so this editorial finishes up, and it says he's out there doing media hits on a platform that isn't his own, a public relations move that until recently he insisted was demeaning and unnecessary. So I mean, we've pretty much covered it all. You know, there are some angles that it could be, but at the end of the day, we don't know. We're going to have to let this one play out and see where he is by the end of the year. I think there's a good chance by Christmas, you know, if we revisit this, I think he could be on satellite radio. Or he you know, even he's such a big star, he doesn't even need satellite radio. You know, he could just set up his own
Either way, I think the moral of it is he's not going anywhere.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And I guess liberals,
in way, shape, or form.
And I guess liberals so want to think that they won't have to deal with him on the public stage that they want to believe more than this actually indicates, but I think that would be false. I think he's still going to be here, but he might not be in the same format. And let's face it, terrestrial radio, you can argue about how fast it's declining, but it is declining. And so it may behoove
Nobody wants commercials, nobody wants, people are spending less and less time at a place where they can listen to it.
And the people who really are passionate about radio or getting audio content, they are willing to pay for a subscription to Sirius XM to have no commercials, you know?
Absolutely.
So
and not even people that are that serious. I mean, there are people that have kids, and they do it because they are kids.
And they have kids channels. They have all sorts of channels, yeah.
Exactly.
And, you know, and also Sirius XM, you know, back when they were two different companies in the mid-2000s, they were really successful because they started bundling it with certain cars, you know?
Right.
And that was very successful.
And how all cars pretty much come with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, my car does. I mean...
Yeah, and it's a really wonderful service. It's really amazing, but...
I think it's overpriced, but yes.
Well, I don't know how much it's priced, but I think it's nice. Any more comments on this before we move on?
No, we can move on.
Next up, we have the tragic story of a raid on a private farm that ended up in the slaughtering of a baby deer. This is the word. Now we're moving on to a very localized but a very tragic story. For those of you who do not know, and I guess most of you would not, I'm very passionate about animal rights and the welfare of animals, and Annika is as well. I've been a vegetarian since 2003, and I'm very sensitive to not only the suffering of humans, but of non-human animals as well, and this story really made me sad. It's coming from Wisconsin, and so this is an article from WISN television. They did a news investigation of an operation that they said was raising questions about the use of government resources and the state policy that meant a death sentence for a fawn. One of the shelter's employees that was targeted by this operation said it looked like a SWAT team. 2 weeks ago, he was working in a barn at the Society of St. Francis on the Kenosha, Illinois border when a swarm of squad cars arrived and officers unloaded with a search warrant. There were 9 DNR agents and 4 separate deputy sheriffs, and they were all armed to the teeth, as if they were going to raid a crack house or something. The focus of their search was a baby fawn, brought there by an Illinois family worried she had been abandoned by her mother. Now, in the video, one of the people who works there at the shelter said that they were going to transport this fawn to a shelter in another state where it was legal to facilitate such an animal in a matter of days.
And they had it scheduled for the next day.
Yeah, they had it scheduled for the next day. But I guess the state of Wisconsin had other plans, and during this raid, which they only knew about the fawn because some people had become informants, and I guess having a deer there, either they thought something sketchy was going on or it just, offended their sensibilities. They called the sheriff, and then the sheriff conducted surveillance, both by hiding in bushes and taking aerial photography. So they then implemented this raid. Instead of just...
Well, you gotta love the aerial photography. They said that they were doing it at special angles so they could monitor the movement in and out of the barn.
Like, did they have nothing else to do? Seriously? You're monitoring a baby.
No, there's no crime in Wisconsin, apparently.
Oh, my God. This just... let me just finish this. So basically, during this raid, they came in looking for the fawn, and while this one employee that was speaking on the video that's attached to this, he said he thought that they would just confiscate him and take him to a no-kill shelter. Instead, a noise was heard inside the stall, and the sheriff and his entourage emerged a few minutes later, carrying the fawn over their shoulder in a body bag. They felt the need that the law required them to kill the animal on sight. This is really sad, and and his name was Giggles.
Yeah. The waste of government resources sickens me.
And an animal died.
He said to him, to the police, he said, couldn't you have made a phone call before showing up? That's a lot of resources.
Well, also, or just...
and that's what the reporter said. And he said, if the sheriff's department is going to do a search warrant on a drug bust, they don't call them and ask them to voluntarily surrender their marijuana or drugs.
As if this is the same thing.
It's a shelter. It's not a drug. It's an animal shelter that was housing temporarily an animal while it was getting ready to be transported elsewhere.
And they'd made arrangements to transport it. So this is just...
Yeah, it had already been all made, all done. If they had talked to the people, they could have said, yeah, it's going out tomorrow. Okay, that would have been it.
Great. But there are so many things that make this case bizarre. Not only the aerial photography component, that they actually used one of their, I guess, aircraft and, their, air photography equipment, whatever it would be. I don't know.
And gas, aircraft fuel is really cheap, too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, having the pilot...
That's why flights cost so little money.
I mean, it just... So much of this doesn't add up. Like, the fact that they were hiding in the bushes, that's okay. But then getting in the aircraft and feeling the need to surveil the deer, and then coming in with, 9 people who were all armed, didn't at some point somebody at the sheriff's office say,
and they denied that they killed her at the shelter. They said they tranquilized her and then euthanized her off-site.
Yeah, because you carry live animals in body bags.
Yeah. Tranquilized live animal in a body bag over your shoulder, like Santa Claus. If it's a dangerous animal, that's one thing.
It's a deer. It's a baby deer.
Baby fawn, exactly.
And
they are planning on suing them, because they say that they removed Giggles without a court hearing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And either way, apparently in certain circumstances, Wisconsin allows organizations to house wild deer, but only with a state-issued permit.
Yeah.
Now, again, it's a shelter. Somebody brought it in. An animal shelter is not going to turn away an animal in need.
Yeah.
That's not what they do.
No, that's not, yeah.
Even a dangerous dog, they will evaluate first.
Yeah. I think I'm really wondering why, and I've never worked in law enforcement, but I would assume that there is this large herd mentality, but didn't anybody in the process of this, because this was a whole production, you had staff on the plane, 9 people, somebody hiding in the bushes, didn't anybody stop and say, wait, this is ridiculous?
You can say it, but you could also be risking your job, and,
Oh my God.
It is a very herd mentality, brothers in blue.
Mm-hmm.
A little person with a big attitude trying to show his superiority.
Over a fawn?
No, over other people.
Over the people in the shelter, yeah.
The people in the shelter, his underlings, whoever, he wanted to make a point.
What a, just...
And this poor little animal got caught in the crossfire of this, I call it SPS, small dick syndrome.
Yeah. Do you think a lot of police suffer from that?
Compensating from other things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Do you think that's endemic in law enforcement, that type of attitude?
No, it's endemic in everything.
Yeah.
And it's not just men. Women do it too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But
You
people
know,
who, I mean, I think it would make sense that people who are gravitating to law enforcement, one of the draws is it is very empowering to you personally, you know?
absolutely. Military, law enforcement, doctors,
Yeah.
lawyers. There are certain careers where you are drawn to the power of it.
And the power can easily be very abused. But is there anything else you wanted to say about that?
No, just that I'm disgusted about it.
It's so sad. And on as well, I don't. I guess I should announce this now. So I was speaking to you, Annika, about this a little bit earlier, but I have started a blog, a companion blog to this program. It's called Music Notes, MUSICKNOTES, and the web address is very easy. It's just my name, jacobmusicmiller.blogspot.com. And there I'm going to be posting episodes of the show, but also I'm going to be posting, additional content that can help you understand the story. Like I will post the link to this video of the local news package about Giggles' slaughter. But also I'm going to use it as a news aggregator. I don't know if I'll always have time to do it, but what I would like to for Music Notes is to have it be a simple place where people can go who are interested in maybe the same topics as me, and just get all of the links that they need, to not have to go to so many different sites for your daily news. And I would aggregate news links from various sources, obviously because we use a diverse pool of sources here. And I would really hope that in the end of the day, it would just make things easier for people, because I know people don't have a lot of time, but it's also still important to know what is going on in the world. So if I can aggregate news, have it all go to one place, and have people find it, access it, and be informed, then that's what I'd like to do with that. But also, I see in the future, if either I or Annika or any of the other contributors and panelists on the show want to write a column, they can definitely publish it on the blog, and you can inspire comment or what have you there. But we are going to go to our final break, and then we'll come back and talk about the elections in Zimbabwe. This week, the embattled African state of Zimbabwe has held presidential elections. The person claiming victory is Robert Mugabe, who has been president for quite a while. So I thought before we get into reports from The Guardian on the election, I felt it would behoove us to get a little bit of background information about who Robert Mugabe is, because a lot of Americans, I don't think they would necessarily know. So he is the president of Zimbabwe. As one of the leaders of the guerrilla movement against white minority rule, he was elected into power in 1980. So it was sort of a kind of Nelson Mandela situation in that sense, where he was a fighter for against these kind of apartheid regimes, and then he came into power after they'd fallen. The thing that he was lucky in is that Zimbabwe's apartheid regime, or white minority rule, fell 10 years before South Africa's did. But he first rose to prominence in the 1960s as a member of ZANU, which was an opposition party fighting for, black liberation, essentially. During the conflict against white minority rule is when he, rose into prominence. He was a political prisoner due to his political activities from 1964 to 1974. He emerged from prison as a hero in the minds of many Africans, and he won the first election in 1980, where blacks were allowed to participate. Unfortunately, once blacks were allowed a place in government, what happened was the two factions, which they weren't even that different ideologically, they were both just like Nelson Mandela's party prior to independence. They were Marxist organizations. It's just one was pro-Soviet Union and the other one was Maoist, and they could not come to any sort of agreement as to how the country should be run, even though they were fairly close ideologically in the big picture. So unfortunately, these two groups split and they started killing each other, and this civil war erupted all over Zimbabwe. And following the death of thousands, neither faction was able to defeat the other, and the heads of the opposing movement reached a landmark agreement where they created the party that is in power now, which is both parties combined, and it's called ZANU-PF. So this merger, in a sense, can be seen as a good reconciliation move, but people have also criticized it as a step towards one-party rule. And actually, in reality, that's really what it has been for a lot of the time. Since 2000, the Mugabe-led government embarked on a land reform program intended to correct the inequitable land distributions created by colonial rule. The period has been marked by the deterioration of the Zimbabwean economic situation. It was well known that in the 2000s, Zimbabwe had, if not the worst economy and the worst devalued currency, then very close to the bottom of the list. Of course, Zimbabwe is not an ally of the British or American governments. It receives a lot of criticism from them and sanctions. And in 2008, Mugabe's party suffered a tight defeat in the parliamentary elections, which is the first time that had actually happened. Annika, what is your opinion or view on former colonial regimes, maybe, under the thumb of apartheid white-only governments that put in place land reform once they come to power?
Well, I have interesting feelings about Mugabe, period. I mean, he started out so wonderfully.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now he's a thug, in my opinion.
Yeah.
He election tampering, intimidation, busing people from other districts in.
Ghost voting, taking boxes and dropping them on the side of the road, yeah.
Yeah. So I have big issues.
Yeah. But about land reform specifically, do you think it's a valid way forward for African nations emerging from white dominance?
No.
No? Okay.
I really think that land reform, it's an issue, yes, but in reality, I think they're using it as an excuse to, not cover some other issues.
Well, yeah, and the sources that I've read also, I do think land reform is essential, but at the same time, I think these regimes, 20, 30 years on, they're still using that issue to stay in power. But also, it wasn't just simple. While there was some positives to his land reform program, and that did have demonstrable benefits for the poor. But at the same time, I would ask, why did you do it 20 years after you got in power? I don't understand why it took him from 1980 to 2000 to do it, number one. And number two, like I said, I think it's used more as a rhetorical and election device than actually.
Absolutely.
And also, his family owns 3 farms. How do you think he got that land? Land reform. So it's not like this is just some beneficial thing, it's not a one-sided issue, but at the same time, unfortunately, this land reform program.
He's kind of playing it both ways.
He is playing it both ways, yeah. Yeah.
That's the best way to put it.
So, to go into a little bit more of the short clips of the history, so both of these rival Marxist factions were banned in 1964. As I said before, he was imprisoned for 10 years. While in prison, his 3-year-old son died from malaria. And he petitioned to be allowed out of prison to attend the funeral in Accra, but was refused permission by the white minority ruler Ian Smith. So I think it was things like that, being in prison, not being able to go to his son.
I don't have a problem with that. You're in prison for a reason.
Yeah, yeah.
Just because something happens, that's good, bad, whatever. You don't get let out of prison. You're in prison.
Well, he was in prison because he was the government was cracking down on black activists.
Well, but again, if that's what the government is doing, why would they turn around and let him out? It doesn't make sense. And if there was, think of the resources for every prisoner that had something happen. You can't do that. You just can't.
But he was able to escape the country. He went to Mozambique, assisted by a Dominican nun, where he was placed in protective custody.
Yeah. If you look at, Nelson Mandela was a terrorist.
He was, yes, back in the day.
Right, and that's why he was in jail. And whatever wonderful guy he is now doesn't change the fact that he was a terrorist.
Well, I don't think that...
You know...
I mean, he was... Well, he was a... Well, he was a terrorist because the government of South Africa at the time, the apartheid regime, considered him a terrorist.
Right, but the ANC at the time, I mean, they did acts that were horrible. People were killed. I'm not, you know, he's changed a lot of his situation, but the point is he was a terrorist at one point. So, you know... In the eyes of the apartheid government, yes. But anybody who even as much as spoke out against the apartheid regime was targeted. And it was the same way in Zimbabwe as well. Absolutely, right. But, I mean, and there are other ways of doing things. But, you know, Mandela did a lot more than just speak out. And this guy did a lot more than just speak out. But it doesn't matter. You know, the fact is that's ancient history. Yeah. You know, it's in the past. He's been the president and the prime minister, you know, and now look at what he's doing. Mugabe? What he's doing now is horrific. Yeah. Yeah. Like, even with, I mean, you know, that argument that there are other ways to do it is so hard. Number one, in countries where you're not even recognized as a citizen or as a person with rights. But also, I know you know that, but it's also... you know, it's so that message that you don't have to resort to violence is so hard to get across to people when you know, even with the ANC's, you know, revolutionarily violent techniques, it still was not able to end apartheid until 1990. So think of if they would have just just been sort of a Gandhi style kind of peaceful activism, who knows when apartheid regime would have ended. I understand that, but sometimes it can backfire. So the violence makes people even hate you even more. And there was a lot of bloodshed in that period, yes. Yeah, that's true. Like I said, I'm not saying it's right, I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying there were bad things that happened in the past. My issue is that he might have been the victim. All the parties agreed on a new constitution for a new Republic of Zimbabwe in 1980. And that started the modern state of Zimbabwe that we have today. But within 3 years, what at first seemed like a very promising sort of democratic system, you could say, you know, just 2 or 3 years later, the military under Robert Mugabe was crushing armed resistance. It was crushing opposition. And a expose by the BBC program Panorama actually accused him of committing mass murder during this period of his rule. How do you think he's still in power if he has really done all these things? Well, there's election tampering. That's one of them. Yeah. You know, and these are people that have seen so much violence that I think part of it that they're opposed to seeing more. Yeah. And I think that's a big part of it. I really do. And it's just kind of normalized. Yeah. So what is it about Africa that continually cranks out this kind of tin pot dictator? Well, Africa historically was tribal. Correct. For a lot of different tribes, and it's a very large place. Yeah. And tribes, it's the one place that really... I think it was more tribalized than any other place in the world. Yeah. Is that they kind of, once they get their power, it goes back into that clan mentality. You know, actually, he was influenced by this person named Julius Nyerere. And to Nyerere, democracy was a detraction that colonialists would use to destabilize newly independent countries. And Mugabe, that's what he believed. And Mugabe was convinced of this. Is this statement that democracy is just a kind of colonialist contrivance, is that valid? I can understand how they might see it that way, because the democratic colonial, you know, governments that own their countries, you know, that they were a colony of. So a lot of them can see democracy as the old regime. Yes. And it scares them. Yeah. So is that valid in that. He's 89 bleeding years old.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And he's vote rigging and he's politicking, and it's like, step down already. You've had your time. You're old.
Just give it a rest.
Retire.
Yeah. Yeah. But I could understand
I mean, that's what convinces me that he does not have good intentions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, the reasons that the fact that he's not stepping down and is doing all the vote rigging and the
Yeah, and he's not even stepping...
traveling and all that.
Yeah.
If he was really loved and winning on his own volition, I could see it.
Yeah.
But the fact that he's cheating to win at 89 years old, he is just totally power hungry.
After having, 30-plus years of power already.
Yeah. He is just, he is completely narcissistic personality disorder.
Yeah.
Just takes over.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, going back to this democracy as a colonialist contrivance, I can understand how that would be convincing, but I can understand how that would be more convincing in the 80s. How is that so kind of something that has political currency now?
Oh, it doesn't. It's an excuse.
Yeah.
That's all. It's an excuse.
Yeah. Going back to the 80s, another controversy that erupted in the 80s, in addition to that BBC Panorama program, is the fact that that within Zimbabwe was a North Korean army training camp. They signed an agreement to jointly train their armies in June 1980. Why would Zimbabwe find North Korea to be an ally? Yeah.
They took the communist side. Now, maybe it was part of what we were going back to with the colonialism and democracy.
And North Korea was seen as anti-colonialist, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so maybe it goes back to that, or it goes back to thinking, if World War III is going to happen, who do you think is going to win? We want to get on their side early.
Yeah. Yeah.
For a while, it really did look like Russia had amassed more weapons than we had.
Yeah.
And it looked like they were more ready to use them.
Yeah. And so it really could have been just...
the nukes that were going to be lobbed were not going to be going to Africa.
Yes.
So if you're training with Korea and they're busy swapping nukes at each other, you've got this great communist training. You can now go out and conquer the rest of Africa while everybody else is fighting their own wars. And you will have a better capability of achieving your goal because you have trained with this, the North Koreans were trained by the Russians.
Yes. And the
top of the world training you.
But also, to a big extent, the Chinese, too.
Right. Well, the Koreans were just more vocal than the Chinese.
Yeah. Yeah, well, China was active in Africa in the Cold War. And if you look at the times, this is kind of going on a tangent, but it's bizarre because I think it was the 50s, the Soviet Union and Communist China were natural allies, obviously. But they had a split in the 50s, or 50s or 60s, and at that point they really ceased being any sort of working relationship at all. And it's so weird because when you look back at these sort of Cold War proxy wars, China would intervene in some of them, in Angola, in Mozambique. Also, well, there were some others as well. I think Namibia as well. But China would intervene on the side of the capitalists and the side of the United States because they disliked the Soviets so much, And that's only come out like 20 years later, but it's really strange to think that was the case, But so going back to this, so I see how this, alignment with North Korea really could be a shrewd power play on Mugabe's part.
Absolutely. And if he even survives the rest of his term, what's going to happen next? I mean, is he going to continue doing this? Basically, he wanted to be president/prime minister for life. For life, yeah. And he's doing anything he can, legal or not, to continue with that. It's really sad. Yeah. What it comes down to, he is a dictator. Yeah. Not in name, but he's a dictator.
Yeah. Yeah. It goes on to say Zimbabwe's 5th Brigade killed between 10,000 and 20,000 people. The report also notes that about 2,000 of these people were killed within the first week of the deployment of the troops. So you see this kind of thing in Africa more so than other places. Why does something like this not happen in the U.S., do you think?
Because we are, the fact is we're not a dictatorship.
Yeah.
What? There are too many checks and balances. We're a first world country. That's why it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
We have journalists, we have freedom of speech. They're on top of it, and they are never going to let this happen.
Yeah. Yeah, to this gross extent. Yeah, I agree. So in terms of economics, during the 1980s, Mugabe's policies were largely socialist in orientation. In 1980 and 1981, the Zimbabwean economy showed strong growth of the GDP. From 1982 to 1989, economic growth averaged just 2.7%. So it fell greatly after that first few years in power when the sort of persecution began, which would make sense, you know? If a people are terrorized, of course they're going to stop being productive. Then later on in the 90s and the 2000s, unsuccessful market reform attempts started and the economy stagnated in this time. Since 2000, GDP has declined by roughly 40%. Do you think that, for more socialist societies, that market reforms are always a good choice in all situations?
Nothing is ever good in all situations. There are always exceptions to the rule. Words like never and always.
Well, the World Bank and the IMF take that stance.
I know, but I'm just saying that's my thing.
Yeah, okay. And the World Bank did publish a report on Zimbabwe in 1995 saying that Zimbabwe, after independence in that initial period, Zimbabwe gave priority to human resource investment and support for smallholder agriculture. This expanded rapidly, and social indicators quickly improved. From 1980 to 1990, infant mortality decreased from 86 to 49 per 1,000 live births, and immunization increased from 25% to 80% of the population, which is really impressive for Africa. Life expectancy increased from 56 to 64, and by 1990, Zimbabwe had a lower infant mortality rate, higher adult literacy rate, and higher school enrollment than average for actual developing countries that were their contemporaries. In 1991. Things changed, though, because the government was short on hard currency and under international pressure. They embarked on an austerity program, which is something the IMF goes into these third world nations and encourages. The World Bank explained that such reforms were required because Zimbabwe was unable to absorb its labor market. They graduated from its impressive education system. Those could not be those could not be absorbed into the labor market. The reforms, however, undermined the livelihood of Zimbabwe's poor majority. The poor were forced to live on marginal lands, as Zimbabwe's best lands were reserved for mainly white landlords. And, the white landlords were a sector of the economy favored by the IMF's plan. This is pitiful, but according to the World Health Organization, today, life expectancy at birth for Zimbabwean men has become 37 years old and 34 years old for women, the lowest figures for any nation in the world. The World Bank's 1995 report predicted this decline, commenting on healthcare system cuts mandated by the IMF Structural Adjustment Program of austerity. It stated that the decline in resources is creating strains and threatening the sustainability of health sector achievement. So that's really sad that, at least, his case as a leader is made worse in the fact that he didn't stick to just one path. He was, pursuing this socialist program for 10 years, then he completely reversed course, and of course that destroys an economy. If the United States were to become...
And it destroys his credibility. credibility, too.
And his credibility, because it looks like he's waffling and he has no ideals, But also, like, if we were to just, and that was what happened with the Soviet Union,
I don't
too.
think with him it's waffling, because he just changed it once and did it. I think he had a view until he got into power, and then once he was in power for a while and knew he had that base, he decided to do what he really wanted to do.
Yeah, and it's also, it's at the end of the day, I don't think he even really cares about ideology. He doesn't have any strong political beliefs, besides his own, personal well-being.
It's power. It's all power hungry.
Yeah, I mean, and it's really like, if it's like when the Soviet Union collapsed and market reforms were brought there. The first few years of, what we have now, modern Russia were dreadful. You can't do this sort of change all of a sudden. Like if the United States all of a sudden, this would never happen, but all of a sudden tried to become a socialist economic system, that would be disastrous, just because you need to understand that, and a good leader understands that change can be radical, but change has to happen slowly. A society cannot absorb just overnight, bam, but for one of the good things that has come out of this is, fortunately, Zimbabwe still does have a literacy rate of 90%, which is the highest in all of Africa. So that is one good legacy of Mugabe's rule. But of course, while he may invest in education, he has also engaged in policies that are blatantly against the poor. He is engaged in the mass bulldozing of poor housing. And the UK's Daily Telegraph has reported that his latest palace, which I guess he has more than one palace, which is dreadful, is in the style...
it's power and,
Yeah.
Anyways.
His latest palace is in the style of a pagoda, located a mile from these destroyed shelters. That's just awful. But then again, I don't know if it's really that surprising. One of the more dreadful things, just to add into here, is back when the civil war between these two Marxist groups was raging on, the first election, he did win. However, I think, was it the first election or the second election? Yeah, in his first election, he did win, sure. But he also said that if he did not win, the civil war would continue. You're really not giving people a choice there, because who wants to see civil war rage across their country? That's an awful thing to do.
Yeah.
It's just terrible. It really shows that he has no regard for the well-being of his nation. So in terms of
He doesn't. He hasn't. All he cares about his own well-being.
Yeah. And in more recent elections, foreign journalists have been harassed or arrested, including a correspondent for the New York Times. And according to the Washington Post, in 2008, he was ready to resign. But his military advisors, who I guess would have a lot to lose, convinced him to remain in the race. Blah, blah, blah. Of course, the opposition, headed by Morgan Tsvangirai, he is heralded by the West. But of course, his slate is not clean either. According to the Sunday Mail in the UK, this opposition party is training youth activists in violent tactics in South Africa. So that's not good either, and that delegitimizes them as well. And also, Zimbabwe has arrested 100 of its own officials and polling officers after the first round of the elections. And this isn't any sort of just normal voter intimidation situation. People were actually intimidated, sometimes with rape. So, this is just horrific.
Oh, yeah. Intimidation happens all the time with everything.
Yeah. He accuses the UK of pursuing a policy of regime change. And, the West says he's an extremely poor role model for the country. What do you think a good role model for an African leader would be?
Look at Mandela.
Yeah.
He's a great role model. He has done nothing slimy, nothing illegal. He won a Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah.
you know?
Well, Barack Obama also won a Nobel Peace Prize. Don't be misled.
Well, it's not for the right reasons. So is Al Gore, for crying out loud. But, yeah. But Mandela won it when Nobel still meant something.
Yeah. Yeah, which actually, wasn't that long ago.
Before Nobel pulled out.
Now it seems they just give them to who was this? Someone I read, someone that was ridiculous who was George W. Bush was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. What?
Al Gore, really? What did he get one for?
But at least Al Gore didn't invade any nation.
Al Gore didn't do anything peaceful.
Well,
he made a climate change movie.
I know, you're right. But George W. Bush is really the outrageous one. But, so, as I said before, Mugabe's party, the party that has ruled since its merger with its rival faction in 1987, ZANU-PF stands for Zimbabwe African National Union Patriotic Front. For the first time in 2008, they lost the parliamentary election, but I think it's looking like from this, quote-unquote election, whether you see it as legitimate or not, it seems like they will come back to power. They're a party founded on the ideology of left-wing nationalism and Marxism-Leninism, but I think really, especially under Mugabe, they just sort of jettison any ideals they have to stay in power, Yeah. Officially, they have a socialist ideology, and they are modeled in communist parties in other countries. However, it's abandoned much of its egalitarian principles associated with conventional Communist Party practice, instead choosing to pursue a mixed economy. Like we were talking about earlier, do you think that's just because really, at the end of the day, he's now just pursuing what he really wanted to do?
Absolutely.
So now let's, done with that background information, going into this article from The Guardian, which says, Zimbabwe elections free and fair, says Robert Mugabe after casting vote. Do you believe Robert Mugabe?
Oh, yeah, free and fair. Mm-hmm.
Do you believe him?
No, not in the slightest.
And it's so weird because there's this one almost surreal. This is a surreal picture with this article. It's him casting his vote. He has this just smug look on his face that just reads, I know I'm already going to win this. I mean,
absolutely.
And there are people behind him just beaming, taking pictures of him on their cell phone cameras. It's like, how can people still be enthused?
They're not necessarily enthused, but
he's a celebrity.
Sure, the celebrity status, exactly. Like if I saw Paris Hilton, would I take a picture of her? Yeah, probably.
If only to send it to me.
Send it to you, exactly.
Yeah, you're right. No matter how your leader is, if you see him, it's still a big event.
Exactly.
So it says Robert Mugabe was
especially if you see him and survive after his secret police don't get you.
Well, yeah, and these people were like 2 feet away from him, so that's probably rare as well.
Yep.
I'm sure
they were all cleared and vetted before they got near him.
Probably, but also, you think about it, for one of the poorest countries in the world, these 2 people are privileged enough to have a cell phone with a camera. So they're probably associated with ZANU-PF, But it says Robert Mugabe was in a jocular mood as he cast his vote in Zimbabwe's elections on Wednesday, talking to reporters.
Mm-hmm. Showing they voted, yeah.
He is Africa's oldest leader.
89, he's probably the oldest person in Africa. Well, Mandela, and then him, and then like the whole rest of Africa.
Yeah, right. I mean, he's 89 in a country where the life expectancy is under 40.
It doesn't matter. He already won. I mean...
Yeah, and there is speculation that should Mugabe prevail, he will step down before his 90th birthday and hand power to one of his allies in the ZANU-PF.
Oh, yeah, but he said no. He said absolutely not.
Yeah, I think people are just thinking, how much longer can he really go, He
said, one journalist asked when he was served a full term, and he goes, why not? Don't you want me to serve the whole term?
Yeah, that's true. So I don't know who is speculating this. I guess because they just think he's going to die. Mugabe had support from Kelvin Mudzing, a 23-year-old electrician. He says, Robert Mugabe is the only person who can stand for us. We're the younger generation, and we need someone with a sense of where we're coming from. We should keep him as long as he's willing to serve. What is his appeal?
He really understands someone that's old enough to be his great-grandson. Yes, I mean, the world has changed so much in Zimbabwe.
Yeah. What is Robert Mugabe's appeal to some people?
That if they vote him, he won't kill them.
That is, I shouldn't be laughing at that because that's awful. But you don't think there's pretty much anybody who earnestly...
No, I mean, that's probably part of it.
Yeah, it probably is. Because, I mean... Yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, he certainly has the power.
That's a lot, that's a lot of what it is. I honestly think so.
Yeah, because, yeah. Yeah, this person says, continues, the 2000 election was a bit tense. There was a lot of violence and people were afraid. And this other person said Mugabe deserved to be honored, but his time is... We feel the old man should rest now. ZANU-PF ministers say that victory is certain. Interesting. How could they know that victory was certain, Annika?
Because he bought the election, essentially.
Yeah, well, and did other things. It finishes up, Mugabe has refused to allow Western observer missions to monitor voting, but the African Union and Southern African region also have thousands of observers present. To wrap up, what are any of your other thoughts about not only Robert Mugabe's legacy, but moving forward? He has claimed victory. What do you see as the future for him, his country, and ZANU-PF?
I think the future for him is death fairly soon. For the country, I think they really need to recover.
Yeah.
They've been so messed up for so long with what's gone on and the turmoil there.
Yes. I mean, looking back on it, in those first few years, maybe 1980, 1981, his administration really had potential. Zimbabwe's standard of life really increased because for the first time the black majority was treated as people, really. Education was very strong. He has the highest literacy rate in Africa. And those are all good things, and they should not be minimized. However, obviously...
he trained with the South Koreans. They had influences on that.
Yeah. And that should not be... those positive things should not be discounted. However, obviously he's made more than several, not only missteps, but actually very violent and belligerent and just dictatorial things. I mean, he is really... Whatever legacy he had coming out of prison as a hero, he is tarnished. And he tarnished it within 3 or 4 years. He trashed it. And it's unfortunate that he couldn't just rule for... even 10 years is a long time in democracy, in democratic terms. If he could just go until 1990 and just give up, then he could at least rest on his laurels. Instead, he is artificially extending his rule, and it's not good for his reputation, it's not good for his country, it's not good for anybody, except his, I guess his power lust or whatever. Why do you think he needed to resort to these dictatorial policies to stay in power?
When he thought things might be declining, he didn't even give it a chance to decline. He just did it. And
probably if he had stayed his earlier course, he probably would have been able to be legitimately elected back. Instead,
Absolutely.
He had this sort of narcissistic, like you pinpointed, this narcissistic personality that was driving him to maintain complete control and not even give up an ounce of control to the democratic process.
Yep.
As far as ZANU-PF, is it a totally discredited organization, or can some sort of candidate who actually has, socialist or communist or whatever, real ideals, can a person actually rise up through that party and re-steer the country? Or is ZANU-PF completely discredited?
Look at Mandela. He did. It's the more difficult path. I honestly think they've been discredited to the point of, honestly, they need to, even if they just change the name of the party and nothing else.
Yeah. They need to just have a new start, for sure. And I wish, I mean, if yeah, this will be the last word for this today, but I think ZANU-PF, they had potential, just like Robert Mugabe. If they can actually recommit themselves to their ideals, if they even have any ideals, then I think that they can survive. However, if they're like Robert Mugabe, who's just willing to jettison his ideals when it suits him, then they have no future, and they need to step aside for somebody who does actually have some values for their country, which is so in need, That's pretty much it. I mean, it's looking like Robert Mugabe, it will still be in power. So Zimbabwe will linger under him for a little bit longer. It's really sad. It's really sad. I mean, I guess until he dies, at this point.
Yeah, and then hopefully he won't have someone that'll just come in and take over. Hopefully they'll be able to hold, real free and open elections.
And see, the concern is, Robert Mugabe is so old. The concern is that actually a lot of the power is not even vested in him anymore. A lot of it is the military.
Right.
The military is so strong. So who's to say that when he dies, the military can't just immediately place a strong man in the presidency?
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Neither of us have the solutions to Africa, because Africa in itself is of a problem. And, Zimbabwe's a basket case. But, as always, this was a wonderful show. You provide hard-hitting analysis and a necessary perspective, and I appreciate you being here. And I know it was very
you're
late.
The optimist. I'm the realist/pessimist. So.
But I don't think you always hew to pessimism, I think you have a very fair and balanced perspective, in the real sense of the word, not the Fox News sense of the word.
There you go.
Yeah, so I know that, you have a lot of stuff to do, but you know what you could really use with your cleaning, staying up all night? You could really use some crystal meth.
There you go. Where can I get some? You have some extra, Jacob?
I actually have none, but, just to the west of here.
What good are you then?
I know. What good am I? Well, hopefully my good is to help people learn about some of these issues that they don't hear about in the mainstream media. But
and believe me, my dogs will get up from the bed and wake up when I start moving and start attacking each other again, and that will keep me up.
So you'll have a riotous, fun night of cleaning. So thank you very much for being here. And
thank you for having me again.
Thank you for the listeners, our threes and fours of listeners that are out there on the internet. Thank you very much, and we will speak to you next time. Oh, and by the way, this episode of The Word is dedicated to Giggles the Fawn. Rest in peace.
Absolutely. Rest in peace, Giggles.
Okay, bye guys. Slavably? Oh my god, it's my handwriting, of course. Slavery? No, following... I'm just going to say, okay, you ready with that meth thing?
You still have bummer pieces today.
Oh, so they're all bummer. Yeah, I guess they were all bummer. But then again...
No, not all. I mean, Rush and Weight Watchers.
There's a new porn, but did you hear the first headline? There's a new porn network.
I know, and I love Adam and Eve.
There you go.
Best quality sex toys.
Really?
And they're cheap.
You know.